Hey there, you're watching DeProgram with Ted Rall and John Kiriakou. It's Tuesday, February 3rd. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, John.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay, a little warmer, or I should say just a little bit less cold.
Yeah, same here.
More accurate.
Yeah, thank goodness.
It's a good feeling. I frostbit my toes many, many years ago as a kid, delivering newspapers in Dayton during the blizzard of 1978. And
I remember it well.
Whenever I get a little bit cold, my toes hurt for like weeks afterwards. And they're just starting like after 2 weeks to feel normal, which is great. So anyway, that's good. Let's talk about, we got a lot, what we have to talk about today. And as usual, please like, follow, and share the show. Just an update on Robbie Aid, which we will be bringing you up to date in a little bit. Robbie West is our producer. He helps make this show possible. And we are currently at $596 out of $1,000 needed for this month. That's just after 1 day.
That's awesome.
Guys, we should be able to get there in a day or two. So if you guys keep up bringing the love, thank you so much. Just a reminder, John and I each kick in $500 every month. So we match you guys match us. It's a beautiful thing. And there's nothing that stops you from helping out, even going above the $1,000. I'm going to put up the GoFundMe. If you just forget, you don't have to really do this. GoFundMe.com/F/DeProgram Robbie. But you'll just go to GoFundMe and just search for one word, DeProgram Robbie. And thank you very much for doing that. We are going to be talking about the Clintons. Kind of surprising. We didn't really predict that. We thought that they were going to hold out and be cited for contempt of Congress. That could still happen. But the Clintons are going to testify. Basically, they're not getting any of their conditions met. They just came out of their hidey hole with their hands up, and they're going to have to testify before the House Oversight Committee about Epstein. Let's talk about that. Also, basically, as China continues to consolidate closer economic ties to Latin America, Costa Rica has a presidential election result. Conservative populist named Laura Fernandez won down there in Costa Rica. Very famously calm kind of country, very friendly to Americans and everybody else who visits. Anyway, she says she's going to continue to the sort of aggressive reorienting of the nation's policies to the far right, continuing the policies of Rodrigo Chavez. And in Uruguay, they met with the president there, Yamandu Orsi, met with Xi Jinping. Always want to say that, Xi Jinping. It shows my age. Anyway, they just signed a dozen strategic partner agreements. So Trump basically has been threatening all sorts of dark things against Uruguay, but I suspect these are empty threats. But we'll see. And finally, last and probably least, Don Lemon says that a dozen federal. He went on Jimmy Kimmel yesterday. I mean, we're in trouble when the First Amendment relies on Don Lemon and Jimmy Kimmel. But in a way, that's how these things always are. Anyway, he said that his lawyers contacted the feds and said, "Yeah, I'll turn myself in. Just tell me when." And they didn't. They weren't having it. And a dozen federal agents, not clear on what agency, showed up with the FBI at his hotel to handcuff him and make a big deal out of it.
That's what they do, Ted. I was just clearing out a file just a couple of days ago, and it reminded me of October 17th, 2019. 22 FBI agents raided my house, smashed holes in my wall, in the kitchen, in the hallway, in my son's bedroom, screaming at me, "Where are the weapons? Where are the weapons?" And then never charged me with a crime. And 22 FBI agents.
Why did they punch the holes in the wall? They thought you had guns.
No, just to be assholes, because I kept saying I don't have any fucking guns. We're gonna find the guns. Sledgehammer, smashed holes in my wall, 3 different places, and then left. Never charged me with a crime.
And of course, there's no way to get compensated.
Absolutely none. You can't sue them.
Yeah. So basically, it's just sort of like sucks to be you
Exactly.
is the rule.
Exactly.
And, I mean, it's what they do. I mean, I think it kind of makes them look silly. It's like, Don Lemon doesn't really look like a master of the universe. Like he could like kick all of their asses.
Right.
I mean, guys, really, it's Don Lemon. He offered to come in.
If you just leave Don Lemon up to his devices, he'll make an ass of himself on his own.
Oh, he's good at that.
You don't need to sort of sanctify him and make him into a martyr.
Which is exactly what they're doing. Him and Jimmy Fallon, two of the
another one I can't
most
stand.
Milquetoast corporatists ever. I mean, but it is like that. First Amendment heroes. You get people like Larry Flint. I mean, that's how these things work.
That's right.
They're not coming for Wolf Blitzer first, let's say, or whatever, Anderson Cooper. All right, so we have lots of questions. Should we do get the Clintons out of the way and then do some questions?
Yeah, cowardly Clintons.
So the Clintons sent this letter, a 4-page letter, if memory serves, about a week ago, saying like, "No fucking way are we testifying. Eat shit. Fuck you. You'll never take us alive, coppers." And well, apparently they're being taken alive. The threat of contempt of Congress appears to be the motivating force there. Even Democrats weren't going to support them. That's basically why, right? They were just scared of contempt of Congress and going to jail.
Yeah, that was it.
And
that
then
like we said yesterday, Ted, Peter Navarro went to prison for 4 months. Steve Bannon went to prison for 4 months. Just because your name is Clinton doesn't mean you're getting some kind of special dispensation. The truth is, had they not gone up there, they were going to prison probably for 4 months.
By the way, I think does it help Steve Bannon's street cred on the right that he went to prison? I would think it would.
Absolutely, yes. Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes him look like a badass. So now they're going to testify. Will they just take the fifth on everything or most things or everything?
Although with Bill Clinton, sometimes he just can't help himself because he thinks he's smarter than you. He gets angry very easily.
Yeah, he has a big temper.
And he might lash out. But otherwise, I think they're just going to take the fifth.
Yeah, my friend Jeff Schiesel was a speechwriter at the White House under Bill Clinton. And one morning, the president came into his office and threw the Washington Post on his desk and said, and it was one of my cartoons. And he was like, "You tell your fucking friend to go fuck himself."
That's Bill Clinton.
And Jeff Schiesel calls me up and goes, "The president of the United States is pissed at you." And I'm like, what? Doesn't he have anything better to do? But anyway, wow. Yeah, no.
Wow, very, very that's strange. Awesome.
Yeah, it's. I was kind of like, those are the moments where you're terrified and honored at the same time.
Yes.
All right. I mean, is there anything else to add about this Clinton thing? I mean, it's like, I guess it's kind of like less
they caved.
Than meets the
they're
eye,
weak. Right? Yeah, it's less than meets the eye. They caved. They're weak. Nothing's going to be revealed. It's not going to be any big story that he's going to admit, "Oh, yes, I had sex with children." No. No, it's just not going to happen.
I guess, I mean, what if the committee has information to the effect that he did have sex with a child? How would that, I mean, I guess then all the more reason to take the fifth.
Yeah.
But I mean, could this be like could Comer have like something up his sleeve to, that he's ready to ambush the Clintons on?
I don't think so, because it would have been out there in the tranche. And there have been so many reporters going through these 3 million new documents that it would have come out.
Does the committee have anything that hasn't been released?
No.
Okay. So, or could it be in those redactions?
That's possible.
Because there's been tons of redactions.
Sure.
Okay, so let's do some questions, John. You get the first one from Frasmataz. Can you okay. Well, okay.
And thank you, Fraz. Thank you for pointing that out. I have no idea how in the world that happened, but I will have them address it.
Tech glitch thing to talk about. Okay. Good morning. Epstein and Richard Holbrooke. What do you think their connection, this is from Mustang Renegades, their connection relationship amounted to?
Say that again?
Was there any connection between Richard Holbrooke and Epstein? I don't know.
I have not seen anything, but it would not surprise me one iota.
Champion Sever 9797. Thanks for the 20. And I do not know what that symbol is for the currency, but John, maybe you do. I don't, but whatever. But thank you for the 20 things.
Thank you.
It. Yes. Thank you very much for that comment. Mr. Tommy, John and Ted are my new morning buddies. And it is our honor and privilege to do that. Manya the Cat, John, did other powers in Lebanon gain influence after Hezbollah got decapitated by Israel? Or perhaps have they?
No, because Lebanon is so weak to the point of being a failed state that even, it's going to sound nuts, even its quote unquote terrorist groups or freedom fighter groups or however you want to label them.
Resistance
groups are non-entities. Hezbollah is the only one that matters. And at least for the time being, it's been decapitated.
Yeah, they were de facto kind of like half the government of Lebanon.
Yes, very much so.
Waterways, thanks for the $10. Any thoughts about, John, you have my total papal dispensation not to answer this question. Any thoughts about Ed Martin being demoted? I am planning to send another letter for John's pardon after the new attorney is announced.
No, he's going to remain as the pardon attorney, thank God. He mentioned a couple of months ago that he had enemies at the White House and that the knives were out. Those were his words. The knives are out. And it looks like they finally got him. So he's no longer the deputy attorney general for weaponization. There was some other position that he had that was internal. They've demoted him. So now he's just the U.S. pardon attorney. And even more insulting, they took his office away from him. And they moved him into the pardon attorney's office. They moved him out of DOJ into the pardon attorney's office in Northeast Washington, which is kind of exile. Almost nothing is in Northeast Washington.
Oh, that's true. Well, at least it's not Southeast Washington. He'd be having to duck bullets.
Seriously.
Askanoid, what do we think about the sellout of the Kurds in Rojava by the American state, and especially Tom Barrack, who's in the Epstein files and is paid by Turkey? No one will ever trust the U.S. again. I don't know anything about this story.
So Tom Barrack is Donald Trump's best friend, period. His best friend. He said it himself. I mean, Trump has said it himself. Tom Barrack is now the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, but he has a broader role where, like Steve Wyckoff, he's sort of jetting around the world trying to, I don't know what he's trying to do. But anyway, Tom Barrack is known as being not pro-Kurd. And he's selling out the Kurds. Look at it this way. The Kurds are incredible survivors. They really are. I mean, the United States has been so incredibly disloyal to the Kurds starting in 1946. They'll end up being okay. Part of the problem
I'd go back to 1919.
Well, 1919, that's a good, yes, you're right. Yes. Not to the extent, that the Armenians, the Greeks, the Assyrians took it on the chin. But yeah, you're right. 1919. They'll come through this.
Oh, this is a great question for you, John. Benjamin Truder. Good morning, guys. Question for you, John. How does the CIA name their operations? Is there a committee? Is it up to whoever's in charge?
It is a randomly computer-generated code name.
Really?
Yes.
So it could literally be like Operation Banana Pudding or whatever.
Well, I'll tell you the only time in all the years that I was there, the only time that it was a problem, I was working with a guy, I'm going to call him, John Smith. So we were doing an operation together, and I went to there's just a little window at this office in the basement. And you go and you say, I need a code name for an operation. And they give you a code name and they give you a serial number. So I went down and they generate, and it's, A.B. Smith. And I said, well, it can't be A.B. Smith. It's the guy's name that I'm working with.
That's so retarded.
And they were like, oh my God. The guy's like, I've been doing this for 20 years. That's never happened before.
That's hilarious. That's amazing. That sounds like a great job. I would want that job, but I'd want to not have it
just
be
hit the
computer
button.
generated.
Yeah,
I'd want to
just hit the button.
That's like being headline writer for the New York Post, potentially.
Yeah.
I know with the military, they try to make it like,
see, there are
freedom or whatever.
Every code name starts with what's called a digraph. So I'm going to make this up so that it's not classified, but let's say it's the operation is Palestinian in nature. It's going to be AB code name, with AB meaning Palestinian case, or CD whatever is going to mean terrorism, or EF.
So all CD in that example would mean terrorism.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, it's kind of exactly. It's like the Dewey Decimal System. But the name after the digraph is computer generated.
So there really could be like the French spy parody movie, which I don't recommend anyone to ever watch, Operation Corned Beef.
See, the way they used to do it, we had like Operation Paperclip.
Yes.
Or Operation, whatever. So, like, for example, MK Ultra, the MK means domestic operation.
All right. Well, that is definitely entertaining. I'm glad this was worth doing this show just for that question. Brian Carroll, morning, boys. Any thoughts on Dr. John Coleman?
Don't know him. Am I missing something?
I don't know. Let us know who he is.
Dr. John
I would look
Coleman.
it up right now, but we have a show to do. Have either of us listened to Daryl Cooper's 26-hour Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem series? Very thorough history of the founding of Israel from the Arab and Zionist sides. Kotarik. I have not. I have read quite a few books about the founding of Israel, but no.
No, and I just looked up John Coleman. So there are three prominent ones. I'm assuming that it's Dr. John Coleman, who died in 2015, a British intelligence officer known for his conspiracy theories about secret societies.
That's got to be.
That's got to be it.
That's got to be it for sure.
Sorry, I've never heard of him before. Sorry.
Okay. Thanks for the fiver from Angela Falalala.
Thank you.
Polar Plunger, glad for this question. Have you followed up on the Greenland question? Apparently the negotiations have stalled. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. So President Trump basically downgraded his demand from the entire territory to the immediate area surrounding the current U.S. facility there. And even apparently those negotiations have stalled. It sounds like the administration was asking for a little more than that. And then basically it was not mission creep, but like sort of, hey, I thought we had a deal. Now you're asking for more than we agreed to. And so that's not going to work for us is the vibe I'm getting. I think the Danes are just like not interested, and it's off the headlines, and the pressure seems to be off, and the president seems to be focused on other issues.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I think the president's so probably spending most of his foreign policy time on Iran right now, and he's not thinking much about that anymore. So
yes.
If you're the Greenlanders, you can breathe easy for the time being. Manya the cat. I suspect the Clintons won't face any consequences. Trump doesn't want to set any precedents for himself when he's former president. I don't know. He knows the knives are going to be out for him no matter what. I mean, they were before. Hey, Ted, do you also live in Quebec City? No, I do not. I was visiting Quebec City. Love Quebec City. Would love to live in Quebec City, but I was just visiting. John, with everyone cynical and always negative like MAGA supporters at times, do you think we're living the best as humans in history as we ever have?
I don't think so. I don't think so, at least as Americans, because we've made ourselves morbidly obese, and we're all diabetic, and we have heart disease and cancer because we eat only processed foods, and we disrespect the environment. And no, I think we're
also, if you're just talking
ourselves.
about economically, it must have been a magical time for our parents who got to live in the post-war economic boom when everything that we were building new things, we were expanding, salaries were going up. You could work at one company your entire life and then retire on a full pension and send your kids to a nice college. I mean, obviously there was, Jim Crow and all that crap, but still, I think not necessarily, right? I mean, there is that argument, right? The better angels argument, which is basically that with the monopoly of violence now being, pretty much limited to the state, fewer people are being killed in random violence than ever have been before. But I'm not sure I buy that argument. I'm not a big nostalgia person, but this reminds me of my old agent, Tony Mendez, God bless her soul, died at 96 years old.
Wow.
Like while working, went to get a phone call, dropped dead just the way she liked. And we used to hang out a lot. We used to have lunch every month at the same hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Anyway, one time we were talking about cartoonists, and she said, the problem with you cartoonists are you don't drink. And I said, what do you mean, Tony? Like, we drink? She goes, you drink beer. And she goes, back in my day, we were lit up by 4:00 in the afternoon and we ruled the world. Now we drink fizzy water and look at us. Never forget that. $5 from Tutotoa. Thank you so much. Did John advise on the Report movie? You just saw it over the weekend and thought it was great. Curious of your thoughts and if you knew Daniel Jones.
I was the script advisor on the Report. And I know Danny Jones, good guy, very good guy. It's funny. He didn't even want the movie to be made. He cooperated with it, of course, but he just he's a very patriotic guy. He just wanted to do his job and be left alone. Yeah.
Sneaker Dad, Ted, you mentioned coin collecting yesterday. Did you know leper colonies had their own coins? No. But
what?
That's cool. Okay, I mean, I imagine we're talking about
that.
Like the Hawaiian one, maybe? Or are we talking about another one? I love exonomia, which is a word which is what coins that are not currency. I mean, are like tokens and stuff. And I do love exonomia. So that's I have to check that out. I love hard times tokens. Do you know about those, John?
Yes.
They're cool. They're from so Andrew Jackson tanked the economy in 1837, and the economy got so bad that that basically money stopped circulating, and there wasn't even enough money for the mint to make pennies. So private companies and individuals started minting their own pennies, and they became like political cartoons, in many cases making fun of Andrew Jackson and his policies. And they're called hard times tokens.
Ted, just a very quick search on eBay. There are all kinds of leper colony
Are they
coins.
cool?
They're cool, and they're cheap.
Really?
From $20 up to the most expensive one I see here is $22.50 because it's
hopefully
made of
they
gold.
don't have leprosy on them.
That's why they were minted, because they probably did have leprosy on them.
Wow. That's so cool. They're
not expensive. And a funny thing, most of them look to be dated 1913. They're from the Philippines, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, Venezuela. Yeah, they're almost all from 1913, 1925, 1928.
Oh, okay. I'm going to check those out after the show. Thank you very much.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Very, very interesting.
Phrasmataz, Ted, I remember you said that political cartooning was a dying profession, but it looks like for better or for worse, AI is enabling a lot of new art. Some of it's slop, of course, for sure. Professional political cartooning is pretty much finished. That could change. All we are is one editor or one producer who's willing to run animated or static political cartoons on a news website like CNN.com, or start having interstitials like the way that The Simpsons started on the Tracy Ullman show, something like that. And everyone's going to see people love them. It's not that people don't love them. It's that and I do think there's a difference between what a professional who lives and breathes political cartooning their entire life can come up with versus what AI can come up with. I mean, of course, obviously, like Seinfeld said, if it's funny, it bends. AI is not going to bend. Philosopher check. In the wake of the new Epstein files, I'm noticing that some outlets are starting to plant seeds about Epstein being a Russian run asset. Is this valid, or is this more of the usual media deflection?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think, I think it's more like clickbait, to be honest, more than deflection.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Robbie, do we have I'll just put Robbie in here. Robbie, do we have an ad?
We do. 1 second. I will throw it up for you, gentlemen.
All right. While you're doing that, maybe we'll remind everybody to please contribute to Robbie Aid for people who are just joining us and people who haven't heard this before. At the beginning of every month, which that is today and started yesterday, we ask the viewers to please fund our ability to keep Robbie on staff. We ask for a minimum of $1,000 a month. We have just shy of $600 from yesterday. So it'd be great to be able to close that out today, if at all possible. I know I sound like a PBS fundraiser here, but it would be awesome to not have to talk about this again until March. But anyway, I'm putting the URL up there. Robbie, let me know when the ad is up. And maybe you can sort of explain again the usual about why people should consider moving over to Rumble.
Well, with Rumble, it's going to be a twofer with this particular pitch. We are currently number 12 on Rumble. And as of right now, while I'm talking, we have 631 people watching over on YouTube.
Great.
Now, those of you who are lefties, y'all are going to love this. We are only 200 people away from one of the biggest pro-Trump channels on Rumble. And even though I'm a right-winger, I despise Trump. I want to take this bastard down. Oh. So if I can get like 200 or 300 of y'all to come on over here to Rumble, for one thing, we can bury this bastard, which would be awesome. Number two, though, from a monetary standpoint, Rumble just simply pays a lot better. YouTube pays based off of ads. Rumble pays based off of watch time. So the more people that are here watching, the more John and Ted get paid. And that's huge. And kind of making it kind of a little bit of a qualitative kind of thing. For every nickel that YouTube pays, Rumble pays about 94 cents. So it's a substantial difference. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're helping pay your two favorite breakfast buddies, and you're helping me take down this pro-Trump lunatic who I absolutely hate. So,
all right. Thank you very much, Robbie. I'll look for that ad. Okay, so let's see. Bill Blair, how much food and medicine are getting into Gaza, Palestine through the Rafah crossing now? Very little, is my understanding. Basically, the crossing opened yesterday to a handful of people who were trying to escape in order to get medical treatment yesterday. I guess it's going to be a trickle. The trickle is going to increase a little more today, but this is not a full-fledged border opening.
No, it's not. It's just a small way of trying to implement the overall Netanyahu policy of expelling every Palestinian.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan. And
yeah,
let's talk a little bit after I read the ad, John, about the details of the Gaza plan that Jared Kushner has veiled out. It's been analyzed, and there's some stuff about it in the papers this morning. But anyway, here we go. They can freeze your accounts, shut off your cards, lock you out of your own money overnight. Banks don't protect you, they control you. That's why real financial freedom starts with ownership. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a non-custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether. You can own Tether Gold, real gold, on the blockchain. Through Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verifiable by serial number, purity, and weight. This isn't paper gold. This isn't an IOU. This is real gold without bank vaults, storage fees, or gatekeepers. You can buy, sell, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can be redeemed for physical gold. That's power. And when you support creators on Rumble, you can tip them directly using Rumble Wallet, peer-to-peer and outside the banking system. No permissions, no middleman, no cancel button. The wallet is yours forever. John, the other day I was reading about gold certificates, the old, the bills. And it was alleged by some collectors that if you go to the Fed, you can, with one of those, you can still redeem them for actual
gold. Yes. Yes.
Which would probably be these days pretty wise.
Yeah. I would do it.
Although
Yeah.
some of those bills are worth a lot more depending on their condition than the gold that they represent. Question. So basically no Palestinians have been consulted in this plan for redevelopment of the Gaza Strip. Is it dead in the water, or what's going to happen here?
What is dead in the water?
This Jared Kushner led
The Jared Kushner thing.
Yeah,
most likely.
Okay.
I don't understand the whole idea of bringing Jared Kushner back under the umbrella. I thought that he said he was sick of politics. He was sick of being stabbed in the back. He wasn't interested in being a target anymore. And he and Ivanka were gonna retire happily to Fisher's Island, Miami, to their $35 million house. Yeah. And then all of a sudden here he is. And it started very simply a couple of months into the second term. And now here he is again, traveling the world with Wyckoff, and then on the side making billion-dollar deals to further enrich himself. It's like this the news that was in the papers yesterday about the $500 million in stablecoin. This UAE, the government of the UAE bought 49% of the shares in a stablecoin company that's owned and managed by Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump. So it's like, when do you have enough money?
Well, that's the question, right? The Atlantic is reporting that at currently Trump's net worth has gone up by $8 billion since he became president in 2017. That's probably an exaggeration, but even allowing for that, he's made a lot of money. And the other thing is the 49% thing is it smells like a bribe, right? Yeah. Like, why do you donate 40, just shy of controlling interest? Because it's just literally like, we're just giving you money and we don't want to run anything.
Yes, that's right.
Literally what it is. It's the opposite of what the sharks on Shark Tank would want. Okay. Thanks very much, Semaman, for the $49.99. Much appreciated. Ted just started reading through your old illustrations. Curious, are you a fan of R. Crumb's work? John, do you believe that if we had a president who spoke Spanish, Russian, Arabic, or Mandarin, would that inform a stronger leader? I respect Robert Crumb's work a lot, obviously. I was very hurt when he sided against me in a high-profile lawsuit that was basically, I sued a dude who impersonated me and got me fired from the New York Times. And this rascal sided, got R. Crumb. I think he obviously lied to him because he lied to a lot of people, but got R. Crumb, who didn't bother to call me to find out what was really going on, and then got his endorsement. So, I'm like, Robert Crumb's a bit of a dingus as far as I'm concerned, but, obviously, look, I wasn't influenced by him at all, but, obviously the talent is undeniable. And I know that's the question for you, John, but I do want you to answer, but I have to say, never hurts to know foreign languages. I mean,
never hurts. I would say, yes, I think it would help a lot. I really do.
You can see it like when foreign leaders suddenly break out into perfect fluent English. It's impressive,
Yeah, it sure is.
Or when George W. Bush spoke Spanish.
Yes. Which everybody loved.
Yeah. Tatum Hedrick, would either of you consider a shamanic trip to Mexico or Peru?
Yes.
In these chaotic external circumstances, you must realize the power within. Sure.
Yes, indeed.
Why not?
In fact, a former lady friend of mine and I had planned to go on one of those ayahuasca trips and just never got around to it. But yeah, I would do that. Sure.
Life is short. Do interesting things. Handsome Libertarian, John or Ted, do you have any recommendations on unbiased books on the history of Israel and Palestine? Not unbiased. I have not found one. When the Gaza war started, I went on a deep dive, John. I don't know if you did the same thing, trying to look for, a book that was considered sort of neutral. I don't think those exist. I think you can find, people on both sides of this issue, and you should read them both, I think. But I read this book, Israel: A History. I forget. I'm going to look up the guy's name who wrote it. And he's a Zionist, like crazy. But the book's great, even though it it delves well into way too much detail about every little battle about the founding of Israel and everything. But, I mean, I think you got to read them from both sides otherwise, and try to draw your own conclusions. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I would agree. I read a book once. Somebody sent it to me when I was in prison, and it was about the history of Zionism. And I was so taken by its balanced approach that it stuck in my mind, but I've searched for it a number of times, and I just can't find it, and I can't remember the title of it.
Are you thinking of Aaron Bregman?
I'll recognize the.
It's got like a brown cover with.
No, it was a white cover.
Oh, okay. So Israel: A History is the Zionist book by Martin Gilbert that I mentioned. And by the way, what's so funny is that even though he's such a Zionist, you can't help but basically you come away thinking that there's no justification whatsoever for Israel or its behavior. And Zionism doesn't really have much historical anything to support it. But that would be my answer to that question.
Yeah.
Let's see. By the way, Trent says that the Pardon John shirt has been figured out, so it can now be purchased. We will. Let me see. I'm going to put up the. I'll put up this URL and I'll figure it out next time you're answering a question, John. But that's it. The shirt looks good. Highly recommended. So
hey, thank you.
Let's see here. God, there's so much stuff I have to sort through here. Okay. John, were you aware of Epstein or any sort of international quote unquote higher power during your time at the CIA? Maybe when you were in that invasion planning meeting, for example.
Oh, that's a good angle. No, I wasn't. I had never heard of anything like that. I did know that the director, for example, of the CIA would go to things like the Shangri-La conference or to Davos or to Bilderberg or whatever. But as I said a couple of days ago, once that former person to whom I was once very close and about whom I'm prohibited by court order from mentioning, when she would go to these things, she said that all they ever talked about was weapons deals. That was it. I mean, sometimes you'd get big muckety mucks like Bill Gates or George Soros talking about the global economy, but it was almost entirely about weapons deals.
Well, there's the shirt, guys. And there's the extremely catchy URL. We're going to have to do better than that. But go to deprogram.creator-spring.com and hopefully you can just search for the shirt, or you can maybe take a picture of your screen and, peck away with the way I would with my 2-finger typing style. But the shirt looks good. I'll leave that up for a little bit. John Hurth, if Bill Clinton is actually found guilty down the road, well, I don't see how he could be because of the statute of limitations.
Right.
Will this begin the collapse of the House of Cards and more accusers will come to light? Yes, it would. Yeah. But I don't see how that happens. Also, why don't more people talk about Bill Gates? Now, that's a good question.
That's a good question. Because, even his wife, his ex-wife now later came out and said that that's why she left him, because he was going to Epstein's Island, having sex with people and then coming home and apologizing. And she's like, now I'm done. I'm taking half of Microsoft.
and according, if the documents are to be believed, he went to a doctor and tried to figure out how he could slip an antibiotic Mickey into her morning coffee to see if because apparently he supposedly had gotten STIs from Russian hookers.
Gross. So gross. Oh my God.
And Alexander Luchti, is it true that the Kurds were the Ottoman Empire's butchers of the Armenians?
That has long been the accusation. Yeah, I mean, who knows?
I don't think that's well. I've heard the accusation as well. I don't know that it's well documented.
Right.
It's not well sourced. It's controversial, right? Elliot Covert, Lord Byron said that the Turks were Muslim Greeks and Greeks were Christian Turks. The petty narcissism of small differences in the grist of politics.
Isn't that the truth?
Logger Jogger, thoughts on the Mideast treatment of Palestinian refugees' children creating a massive second class seems bad, or does U.S. birthright citizenship approach just facilitate ethnic cleansing? I'm a big believer in birthright citizenship.
I agree with you.
And because even though it causes all sorts of problems, it seems when you consider the alternative, like they have in France, where you have third and even fourth generation undocumented stateless people, it causes all sorts of problems. So it's not fair to blame people for the sins of the fathers, right? If your parents snuck you across the border when you were 5 and you were basically luggage, how is that on you? I mean,
that's right.
I mean, the law should only punish you for a crime that you committed, that you were aware of, that you did consciously. Mm-hmm. In Pakistan, John, HP is asking, did you ever have any interactions with the Pakistani mafia? And did they help or hinder your operations?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Isn't the Pakistani mafia just the military there?
For the most part, yeah. No, I didn't have any formal interaction with them. And it was always my understanding that they were far more active in Dubai. Like they have a huge presence in Dubai, like the Irish mafia has. They're also in Dubai.
Weird.
No, I mean, we would run across sort of petty roadblocks where you have to give them a $5 to let you. I mean, there were a couple of times where I was in the car with senior ISI officers at the colonel and brigadier general level, where we're stopped at these illicit roadblocks. And even though the guys shaking us down are privates and corporals, the general just paid the money to let us go on our way.
It's easier that way. It's just the way things are. You shouldn't even get angry about it. That's what I discovered.
Yeah.
It's basically just like, it's like paying a toll.
It's exactly what it is. It's like paying a toll. Yes.
Or a bridge troll.
Yeah.
Humongous. Why would the Clintons go to jail for contempt? Obama man's Eric Holder was called to Congress, never went to jail.
Yeah, but his argument was that he was a sitting cabinet member. And so whatever he would be asked to testify was protected under executive privilege. The Clintons have no executive privilege because all of this happened after, they were in the White House. And Hillary was never in the White House. So there it is.
David King,
as president,
as a question for the CIA guy, that's not me. Was Epstein the best honey trap ever? Was Mossad in charge?
I believe I've been very public about this too. I believe Mossad was in charge. I believe that he was a Mossad access agent, and I think that just judging by the level of people who've been caught up in this thing, I would say, yeah, probably he was the best ever. Sure.
Adnan, John, which world leader did you really admire during your time at the CIA? This is in regards to their foreign and domestic relations. Someone who was underrated. That's a good question.
I think King Abdullah of Jordan is absolutely brilliant. I really do. I have great admiration for him. I also have had great admiration for Emir Isa bin Salman al Khalifa, the Emir of Bahrain. What a kind and gentle man he was. He was not willing to put up with riots in the streets. I mean, he was for the most part until people started getting hurt and killed, and then he came down with an iron fist. But Abdullah of Jordan is able to walk this tightrope. And remember, this is a guy who never wanted to be king, never intended to be king, wanted to just go about his normal business, and then was just thrust into it. And he's embraced it, and he's done a great job leading that country.
So, John, maybe you could shed some light on this story, because it's been a story that's haunted me. But the ousting of President Akayev in Kyrgyzstan, that appears to have been at least partly a CIA operation, right? Under George W. Bush.
I've always assumed that it was.
I mean, so yeah. Kyrgyzstan, the capital Bishkek is in the northern part of the country. Osh is in the center. It's an ancient city. It's a hotbed of Islamic fundamentalism. And there was an Osh-based uprising against President Akayev. He was the only democratically elected president of a Central Asian republic at the time. Bush was pissed at him because he was trying to raise the rent on America's air base in Bishkek at the airport there to get a little more money for a very poor country. Anyway, long story short, the insurgents came to Bishkek, overthrew. The reason I thought about this is because you mentioned this kind and gentle leader. Akayev his security forces said, okay, we're going to fire on these demonstrators. And he said, absolutely not. I don't want any Kyrgyz to die because of me or my regime. I'm leaving. He fled in exile, went to Russia. And when the insurgents broke into the presidential palace, they found on his desk a letter that said, please take good care of my country. And I remember just thinking, like, what a cool guy, right?
Wow.
Like, the rumor was that the CIA had trained and supplied and armed the insurgents down in Osh. Sounds like it sounded credible at the time.
Yeah, it sounds credible to me. Sure.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I've often thought it would be I always thought there's a book somehow there, but
very cool.
Anyway, Aknek Koljin, John and Ted, how can one practice to build rapport as skillfully as ourselves? Well, it wasn't any work for me.
No,
anyway.
Me either. You just have to genuinely love being around people and communicating with people. You just have to love it. Yeah. I'll give you an example. I went out with I have a friend from the movie that I did in Mexico, and she's wonderful, gifted, and naturally talented actress. And she said, "Oh, I have these friends from New Hampshire, and I love them, and they're great, and you should meet them." I happily went out last night and met up with them in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. Met them in a bar at the Ritz-Carlton. And we sat there and yucked it up for 3 hours. I never met these people in my life. They were complete and total strangers to me. And we had a genuinely wonderful time. You just have to enjoy doing stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think, look, it's also with some people, you just get along or you don't.
That's it.
And you just like each other. I mean, I remember one time walking into a party and I literally felt the hairs on the back of my neck go up. And I was like, someone's here who's bad. And I don't know who. And then ultimately I later figured out it was some dude. And it was just like, he actually did, like a year later, it turned out he really was a bad person. And it's just like, so.
Ted, I got to tell you, when I was up on Capitol Hill, working for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I was dealing with this guy, the spokesman for DEA. And I was like, how in the world can this guy be the, GS-15 at least spokesman for DEA when he's 32 years old? Like, wow. Who did this guy blow to get this job? Seriously. Yeah. So I didn't like him. He just seemed phony to me. And I can be phony, but
he just rubbed you the wrong way.
But mine's a convincing phony. Yeah, he just rubbed me the wrong way. I just did not like this guy. But I had to deal with him, because I was doing a lot of stuff with DEA at the time. So I leave the committee. I go to prison. I come back in 2015, just in time for the FBI to arrest him. What he was doing, this SOB, is he was going to private companies with which the DEA had business. And he was saying, listen, it looks like I'm the DEA spokesman, but really, I'm deep cover CIA. And if you want to win these really lucrative contracts with the CIA, you're going to give me $100,000.
What?
And I'm going to set you up with these, CIA contracts.
Motherfucker.
Yeah. So he collects like $500,000. And then when the contracts never materialized, these people went to the DEA inspector general and they were like, holy shit, we have to call the FBI.
What did they say? Did they say like, well, we were trying to bribe
him. Yeah.
And
we're trying to bribe him, but nothing happened with the bribe. But the deal was that they wouldn't be prosecuted if, they testified. He ended up getting years in prison, years. And then the last time I saw, he was in like Montana or Wyoming or something like that in prison.
What a rascal.
Yeah.
I mean, I always kind of like, mostly 90% I'm like, what a turd. But there's some part of me like, man, how do people like this even like think of such shit? That's amazing.
Seriously.
Uruguay. It seems symbolic. It looks like, China's making a lot of inroads there, in Costa Rica as well. So, I
love it there.
So, it's nice. I've never been to Uruguay, but I've heard only good things about it.
I took the boat from Argentina, from Buenos Aires to Montevideo. And it was on my honeymoon. The boat is so big. We got on the boat, and my bride said, "When do we get on the boat?" Because you walk up the plank and you're just in this casino, no windows or anything. It's just a casino. And she goes, "Where do we get on the boat?" And I said, "We're on the boat. This is the boat." And the trip is only like an hour, but you're supposed to gamble and play slot machines, and everything. We got off in Montevideo, and oh my God, had the most wonderful time. They make the most wonderful white wines down there, but using French grapes that they imported more than a century ago. And the food is fantastic. The people are lovely. It's just a gorgeous country. Like I could live there.
So
in Uruguay.
So does the President Orsi have cause to be afraid of Donald Trump?
No.
So,
No.
And is there anything the United States can or should do to improve our trading relations with Latin America?
I think we should be doing everything we possibly can to improve our trade relations with Latin America because the Chinese are going to put us out of business.
Yeah, it's already started.
Yeah.
Okay, life hack from P. Vecchio, and thanks for the buck. Rumble Rants gives you 200 characters for $1 versus $2 for 50 characters on Super Chats. And more money goes to the creators. Give more money to Ted and John and less to the deep state YouTube. Okay, all right, cool. Thank you. Martin Mortensen, I expected the juicy blackmail stuff in the Epstein files would be released, something that John could get some insights on. But honestly, it seems like you're avoiding the topic except for bashing the Clinton, says Martin Mortensen. And let's see, there's criticism. Someone else said that they're disappointed with our takes on the Epstein files. So I don't know what that means, but I don't know.
No,
go ahead.
I'd be interested. I'd be interested to know what that means because I'm happy to have that conversation.
For sure. We'll talk about anything. Well, pretty much. Okay. Do we have any thoughts, insights about, thanks for the fiver. Any insights on the rift between Gaddafi and Arafat, how it affects the Palestinians today? What was Israel's role in creating that rift?
Oh, that's a great,
Arafat?
Oh man, we can go for half an hour on that. That's a great question and an important one. Gaddafi never really connected with the Palestinians. Gaddafi didn't like Arafat because Gaddafi saw Arafat as just corrupt.
Mm-hmm. That he wasn't wrong.
No, he wasn't wrong. Arafat was notoriously corrupt and had billions of dollars in Swiss banks. And Gaddafi genuinely wanted to spread the wealth. But when the Arabs wouldn't let him into the club, he began focusing on Africa, right?
Yeah,
and the Organization of African, what was it called? Organization of African Unity or something like that at the time. So when it came time in 1982, where the Israelis so beat up the Palestinians that they pushed the PLO out of Lebanon, they got onto these ferries just to flee. And Philip Habib, who was Ronald Reagan's special envoy, negotiated a settlement for them, not in Libya, but in Tunisia, because Gaddafi wanted nothing to do with them, nothing. And so that's why they ended up in Tunisia for a decade until Oslo.
Well, I mean, that's
I would say, though, I'm sorry, let me finish this thought real quickly. I would say that the PLO did far more damage to itself upon Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1991 than we saw in the rift between Arafat and Gaddafi. The rift between Arafat and Gaddafi, nobody cares about anymore. But the rift between the Palestinians and the Gulf states is still very serious. They live it on a daily basis.
New York Times is reporting, speaking of the Epstein files, that a bunch of photos, nude photos of underage women were released unredacted.
Oh, that's true. The New York Times actually called the Justice Department and say, hey, do you guys realize that you've released all these nude photos of children? And then the Justice Department had to go back and redact the photos.
So technically speaking, isn't the DOJ now responsible for disseminating child pornography?
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. Desert Fox. I'm starting a Substack on history. It's small now, but I want to write about unexplored history, parts of history in the world.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
That's awesome. Yes.
Are you familiar? Thanks, P. Vecchio, thanks for the $2. Are you familiar with the allegations about Epstein money laundering during Iran-Contra and beyond? It seems like that allegation is as big a threat as the blackmail to the establishment elites.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
That's Iran-Contra, though, is like the.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. It's hard to. Yeah. I'm not sure that timeline works. Let's see.
Hey, real quickly, we have like a minute and a half.
Yeah.
What the heck is up with Savannah Guthrie's mother?
Right. Nancy Guthrie, I believe that's her name.
What in the world? It looks like she was kidnapped.
Looks like she was kidnapped in an old-fashioned Lindbergh type kidnapping, where basically the sheriff is saying the house was trashed. Someone went in. She's gone.
She's 86 years old and she can't walk
84.
50 feet. 84, and she can't walk 50 feet.
Right. So
she's just gone.
And Samantha Guthrie from the Today Show was supposed to today or tomorrow be on a plane. I guess today to be on a plane
Olympics.
To go to Italy, right? For the Olympics.
That's right.
So so she's not going to be doing that. Obviously, This is weird. John, I was thinking when I read this story, and we only have a minute to go. Doesn't it feel like the 1970s all over again? Like the street violence, the tear gas in Minneapolis. Now this kidnapping story of Samantha, where famous people like John Paul Getty, the third was kidnapped.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, it feels like the 70s all over.
Yes, indeed. It really does. It feels like the 70s.
So weird. All right. Well, and then Don Lemon.
Of all things.
Of all things. I mean, look, we have to support Don Lemon, even though he's an asshole.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
And he is an asshole. Okay. So with that, thanks, John, as always. We will be back tomorrow. We're here Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Thursday, we'll be doing the same thing in DMZ America. We'll be back on. Stay tuned for the TMI show with Manila Chan and myself. Thank you very much for your support. Don't forget Robbie Aid. Let's get that done today, if at all possible. But if not, I'll be back bugging you about it tomorrow. Thanks, John. Talk to you later. Bye, Robbie.
Bye, everybody.